Welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing some one-star reviews. I love doing this for my favorite books of the year. In fact, this was a video I planned to do for the 12 days of Christmas, but it just didn't work out. But anyways, I love to look at my favorite books of the year and then look at some one-star reviews. I'm specifically looking for ones that are petty and funny because I find that to be utterly hilarious when people get really petty and hilarious with the reviews that they write. So I am going to be sharing some of those with you. We're going to kick off with Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which was my #1 book of the year. And surprisingly, it has a 3.97 star rating on Goodreads. I say surprising because a lot of times classics that I really enjoy that were also books that kids were forced to read in school, like Fahrenheit 451, have a lower rating than this. So this is actually pretty good, I think, for a book that is often assigned to kids in high school or college. There is only 67,000 one-star reviews, as opposed to like there's over 1 million 5 stars and over 1 million 4 stars. So there's only 2% of the reviews that are 1 star. So that's actually pretty good for a Bradbury in general, I think. Because his prose can be a bit off-putting to people sometimes. So let's see what the people have to say. My prediction is that people are not going to like the prose. That's kind of where I feel like we're going to land with this, because that was definitely something that I saw when I did 1-star reviews of Something Wicked This Way Comes a couple of years ago. This 1-star review simply says, "The way you can tell this was written by a man is he writes a teenage girl who walks alone at night and voluntarily begins a conversation with a male stranger." Like, that's why you rated this 1 star? It was also, written in the 60s where it was more likely for people to walk alone, even women and even teenage girls and even young girls, and be less afraid to talk to men. So I don't know. This one says, "Unpopular opinion time. Everyone seems to love this, but for me, it is possibly the most overrated book of all time. If this book had a face, I would punch it." The message of the book: you shouldn't burn books, and books are a huge part of our and society's identity. Yes, that message is beautiful. So also, you shouldn't write like an elementary school kid, copy a lot from 1984, and write way too long and boring books. The good? Nope, nothing comes to my mind. I'm really not sure how you could say this is written like an elementary school kid, especially considering people, and I've seen reviews that I'm not pointing out here because they're just too long. I've seen so many reviews of people criticizing Bradbury for like overly purple prose and just like the way that he phrases things in a way that an elementary school kid could never, because it's just like way too drawn out for an elementary school kid. And also, I don't feel like this is copied from 1984. It takes a very different turn, in my personal opinion. But I guess a lot of people could think that all classic dystopian books are copying 1984, which I'm pretty sure was inspired by by Zamatavin, is that, or Zamatavin? Or I don't remember the last name, but a Russian author who actually, that book came out before 1984 and apparently has a lot of similarities to 1984. So it's kind of funny that 1984 is the gold standard, but not only was it not the first dystopian novel, but it borrowed things from other novels as well. I'm not trying to knock 1984. I love 1984. But also, I don't know why you would say that Bradbury writes too long of books. I feel like all of his books are incredibly short, including this one. This one just says, "How ironic, yet fitting, if we were to burn all copies of this book." One more short, punchy ones, because those are my favorite. "How ironic that a book which so fervently professes the virtues of literature contains none itself." Moving on to Foster by Claire Keegan. So I actually did Small Things Like These last year for my video like this, because Small Things Like These made it into my top 10 last year. And I remember people not liking that Claire Keegan didn't delve more into the historical component of the book. And this doesn't really have like a historical component to it. So I'm not really sure what the complaints are going to be this time. Maybe that the writing isn't sparse, or maybe that there's not like a full and true ending and things are left open-ended. That might be kind of a complaint, because that was the case in Small Things Like These as well. But Foster has 4.31 star rating overall out of 162,000 ratings. Less than 1% are 1 stars, so we won't have a lot of 1-star reviews. There's only 647 people who rated this book 1 star. But dang, we're starting off with a bang. The first one just says there's got to be bad books for good ones to exist, I guess. Hot take, I suppose. Oh my gosh, absolute nothing of a book. A girl goes to live with a couple where she collects the mail. A few months later, she's going back home and is all of a sudden bereft at leaving the couple. She must love collecting their mail. I guess so. Or maybe this person just needs everything explicitly spelled out. This person must love telling rather than showing. Okay, so I'm only going to read the second part of this review, because the first part is just someone talking about how boring they thought it was, but the second part is hilarious because I don't remember this being part of the story at all, but apparently this really stood out to this person. Also, the writer has a major foot fetish, trumping even Quentin Tarantino, and it unironically turned me off from reading. Way too many times was the word feet and toes used in less than 90 pages of text. Case it somehow slipped away from your mind while reading, here are some quotes from this wonderful writer. Watch the woman as she scrubs my feet. Long legs, nice long toes, gently stroking her feet. It's unsettling, frankly. I don't remember any time that feet or toes were like mentioned that felt odd or off-putting or anything like that. So I'm like very confused by this review. If you remember feet and toes being mentioned like a startling amount of times in this novella, I would love to hear if you remember that, because I sure don't. Next, we're going to talk about Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I highly anticipate this having a lot of 1-star reviews because I could see this book being incredibly polarizing. Even people I know who really enjoy Ishiguro, I know quite a few of them, have said that this is their least favorite of his works. I'm the opposite. I'm not an Ishiguro fangirly, and this is my favorite of his works. So I definitely think that there will be people who don't like how kind of open the plot points are, and there will be people who will be like, what is this book even trying to say, and all of that kind of stuff. This book has an overall star rating of 3.74 out of 432,000 ratings, and 3.74 is for sure the lowest rating of books we have so far. So this is going to be good, I think. Although it says only 1% is 1-star ratings, but there are 6,000 of those. So let's check some reviews. This review is far too long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there is just this emboldened thing at the very beginning of the review that says, wearing sunglasses for this review because I'm anti-sun and anti-Klara. This says, short summary, robot, sun, AI, friend, sun, 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 sick kid, sun, 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 sun. I'm sure I missed a few suns in there. If there's something that the author achieved with this book, it's the impressive feat of using so many words to say nothing. Nothing happens for 90% of the book, and when it does, it's underwhelming. This book is supposed to be a message against global warming. Maybe printing this book and killing trees wasn't necessary for this one. I actually don't feel like this book's purpose had anything to do with global warming at all. So that's really interesting that that was this person's take. I mean, there was some talk about pollution and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe that's where the person gets that from, but I think it has so much more of what it means to be human. And I feel like there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes and you couldn't figure out exactly what was going on for a bunch of the book. But it was just so funny that, if you think the book's supposed to be about global warming, then I could see why killing some trees would make you upset. Next, we're going to go with a book that I'm certain is quite polarizing because it's such a weird book, and I can't believe still that it made it into my top 10 of the year. That's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This book has a 3.8 overall star rating on Goodreads, so it's actually not that much higher than Klara and the Sun. It has 301,000 star ratings, and 2% of them are 1-star ratings. So it has a higher percentage of 1-star ratings than Klara and the Sun, even 2% of them at a little over 6,000 1-star ratings. This review is fabulous, but also kind of valid. It says, you know, when somebody has a dream and they really want to tell you about it because they're sort of impressed with the vividness and the complexity of the world they created while they were asleep, so they rattle off all the details to you and you don't get any of the joy of discovery or artful storytelling or delightful surprise or characters, just things like, and it was sort of alive but also sort of not alive, you know, and there was a guy there who's just energy, right? That's what this book felt like to me. I mean, that's kind of valid. There's a lot of things we don't get answers about, and for so much of the book, you're really questioning, like, how much of this is actually real. It does feel like a fever dream. And so I do think that that's very valid criticism. I don't know. I'm still confused, honestly, as to why it worked for me. Well, the only memorable achievement of this book is being my first ever 1-star. Congrats! I love that. I have very few 1-star reviews also. I had one in 2025, and it was the first one since 2021. So good job, Jeff Vandermeer. Oh dear, I fear this review did not come out the way this person intended it to. A short book for me, and not normally one I do, but have heard so many great things about it, and the library had a copy, so be rude not to. Oh dear. Turned out to be mostly one long, boring monologue. Started off with a decent premise with a group of scientists exploring a kind of forbidden zone, but as all the scientists are women, why is it spelled with 2 I's? It quickly disintegrated into being all about their feelings, as opposed to involving any real action or suspense, let alone drama. When we're down to one, it spirals further into childhood memories and feelings/monologue about her husband. I find this a lot where women are solely involved in a book, or indeed women authors. There, I said it. Defo not for this chap. Moving right along. I am so confused by this review for several reasons. First of all, yes, all the people in the expedition are women. Second of all, it is written by a man. Like, this book is written by a man. So it's really funny. Third of all, a complaint that I hear often about this book is how cold and detached our narrator is. And she is a biologist, and she's definitely more scientifically minded, and it feels like she doesn't really have very much emotion. And so a lot of people have a hard time attaching to the biologist and caring about what she's telling you and believing what she's saying, because she doesn't have a lot of emotion behind what she's saying, as opposed to some other people. And so for this person to say that this all comes down to people talking about their feelings is like a polar opposite of a lot of the complaints I've heard about this book. This review says, I like mysteries and sci-fi, but everything here remains a mystery. It leaves you with more questions than answers, and I think that's very lazy, coming from a writer who invented the whole shebang. It's like he didn't know how to explain everything himself. He also chose a narrator who isn't reliable throughout the story, so you have to question her as well. Such a shame. It could have been a great story. Anyhow, I won't buy or read books numbers 2 and 3 of this series, that's for sure. I find it hilarious that someone is criticizing book 1 for not answering the mystery when it's part of a series. Granted, I don't know how much Vandermeer answers things in subsequent books because I read book 2, and we do get some insight into book 2, into what's happening in book 1, but not any like definitive answers. So I don't know if we get definitive answers in book 3, and Vandermeer has gone on to write several more. Well, I think at least one more, but I think he's planning on writing a 5th one. And so it's kind of like, okay, but if this is a series, why would he give you all the answers to the mystery in book 1? You know, but I realized that there's a lot left unanswered, so I could see why people would be unsatisfied with that. It's funny because a lot of these reviews, these 1-star reviews, are very serious and very long and like so many paragraphs. And this person just says, this book was awful. I've already written too many words about it. So Points for being concise when everyone else has apparently dissertations as to why they dislike this book and they need to nitpick every little element of it. Okay, let's do Time of the Child by Niall Williams. I'm anticipating people saying that this book's prose was like too wordy for them, and also that it was boring because nothing really happens until about halfway through the book. So I could anticipate people not liking this one. But it does have an overall star rating of 4.23 stars, but there's only 14,000 ratings, which is kind of surprising for me. I know it's kind of a newer book, but I guess I just thought Niall Williams was more popular than that, and maybe I thought that because I know quite a few people who read this book. So maybe it's just that I personally know people who have read this and enjoyed it, but there's only 217 one-star ratings. So that is 1% of all of the ratings. And I think there's only 55 one-star reviews. So we'll see if we can find something fun. Straight off the bat says, I can't possibly imagine a book that would be more boring than this one. So I called it. I knew that people were going to think it was boring because not enough happened. This one says, I thought this book was horrible. And the only thing I remember reading is the doctor will decline tea every time. You know, he does. He does decline tea a lot. This person wrote a one-star review before they've even finished, and I've noticed that's a trend, that a lot of one-star reviews say DNF. But this person wrote a review before they officially even DNF'd it, saying, so far this is awful. I've skimmed by all the pages so far. I'll keep going and update if it gets better. And then there's the next sentence is like another paragraph, so I don't know if this is an update, but it says, good grief, do these authors get paid by the word? Which is kind of hilarious because though I will say that the story itself is drawn out and that the author has beautiful prose, this book is under 300 pages long. It's not a long book. Yeah, most of these reviews say DNF and that it was too many words. So I'm not surprised, but there really aren't very many funny reviews for this one. Okay, let's end with a classic because it's sure to have more funny reviews. At least I really hope so. So we're going to end with Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, which has an overall star rating of 4.13. It only has about 50,000 star ratings though, which is interesting. I feel like this is not a book that would be commonly assigned in school or anything like that. So probably there are less people who have read it. It does have 728 one-star ratings, which is 1% of all the ratings. Kicking off strong with a, oh my gosh, it's an unfinished story. The author died before writing the last chapter of the book. After 650 pages, there should be disclosure laws for this sort of thing. I thought everyone knew that Wives and Daughters was unfinished. Like, I think that there's probably something in the introduction of the book, there's probably something on the back of the book, and at the end of the book, there is a publisher's note that does kind of wrap things up and tells how, you know, Gaskell intended to end some of the final scenes, but like you do know how it's going to end. Like it's really clear. It's not like we're missing the last like half of the story or more of that. Like I know lots of people enjoyed reading The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Dickens, even though that was very far from being finished, but was like his last book that he was working on and was like being published serially. And so Wives and Daughters is the same way. Like, of course it would still be around because she was publishing it serially. So it's not like they just chose to publish an entire book without the author ever finishing it. So it's just funny that like there should be disclosure laws. This person feels so wronged. It's interesting. This person says, what an awful style of writing. Already the first sentence of this book is off-putting and obtrusive to me. Instinctively, I wanted to put this novel down there and then. To begin with, the old rigmarole of childhood. In a country, there was a shire. And in that shire, there was a town. And in that town, there was a house. And in that house, there was a room. And in that room, there was a bed. And in that bed, there lay a little girl. But I did go on for approximately 2 pages of the book, and I could not do it. The vocabulary, the rhetorical style, the idioms, the writing style gets on my nerves. I hate it. So it's really funny because I vlogged this for my Patreon and I always try to read the first sentence or the first paragraph of a book before I start my vlog so that way I can kind of get like a taste test and do that as like my first update. And I talked about how much I loved the first sentence of this book because I felt like it felt so whimsical and so almost fairy tale-esque. But I don't think that any part of the rest of the book feels like that very beginning. It's really just that. So it's really funny that this person was like so off put by a first sentence that I found to be very endearing. I find this review to be just slightly ironic that says, "Ugh, this audiobook took me forever to push through. I was hoping for a North and South experience. Instead, the author sadly dies before the book is complete, so the final climax for the whole drawn out book builds to the last chapter is basically tacked on by a relative of the family with far less impressive writing, and it completely loses the effect. So disappointing." It's fair to be disappointed that this book didn't have like the full last chapter, that she passed away before that happened. But I find it ironic that this person wanted a North and South experience, because North and South ends so abruptly. That was actually one of my complaints about North and South, is that the whole book builds and then you get like 2 paragraphs or maybe even like half a page. I don't know. You get very little at the end of like the climax, because Gaskell was told by the like serial publishing, whatever journal was publishing this, they told her she needed to wrap it up quickly. And so she did. And it feels rushed and hurried and tacked on. And so I find it funny that this person was hoping for the North and South experience, but they didn't like the like briefly wrapped up, tacked on ending here. This person just said, "Too outdated. Did you not know you were reading a classic, ma'am?" I just saw 3 reviews in a row that compared this to Jane Austen. One of them said, "I wanted to read Elizabeth Gaskell mainly because she's a woman author in Jane Austen's time and probably a bit more socially conscious than Jane." And then someone else said that they were disappointed it wasn't similar to the Jane Austen novels because it was more drawn out. And then another person said it had all of the social convention and societal pressure of Jane Austen's Regency era, but lacked the wit and zing of Austen's writing. So it's really interesting that all of these people are comparing her to Jane Austen when she didn't write in the same time period. She was not writing in the Regency era. So I think that that's really funny. But someone expected her to have more social commentary than Jane Austen, and I don't know how you can have more social commentary than Jane Austen. Although, to be fair, North and South actually does have a lot of social commentary, but Jane Austen is known for writing satirical commentary on society and criticizing it, and I just think that's funny. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap this up here because I've been filming for actually like a really long time. It won't be as long when you watch this because all of the times I'm scrolling and reading through reviews will be cut out. But I hope you enjoyed some of these hilarious reviews. Some of them were really petty, and those are my favorite kinds of 1-star reviews, the ones that are silly and funny. I was expecting more funny ones for Annihilation, so I was kind of disappointed because I thought there would be some hysterical ones, because I feel like weird books or even more modern books have a lot more just like really petty, sarcastic reviews, and Annihilation was disappointing in that regard. People were way too serious about their dislike about that book. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.